Hey guys, Uncommon Ramen here. Before I get into the video, let me remind you, if you like the videos I make, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. And if you want to see more content as it comes out, hit that bell icon. Also, as a reminder, if you feel the need to support me, hit me up on my Patreon at patreon.com/uncommonramen, capital U, capital R. I do all of this in my free time, so any amount of support can help me bring more content to you more often. So, without further ado, today on TCG Tuesday, I wanted to take a look at an older deck that I had kind of almost archived. I bought this deck way back, I want to say almost a year ago. I had happened to be reading a bunch of articles about Commander, and one of the articles I found was an article that was literally stating how to lose your friends for $20. And of course that piqued my interest, and don't ask me why. And what I ended up getting was a Zurgo Helmsmasher budget deck, and it was hilarious, but it was atrocious when it came to pretty much everything in that deck. There was some savable cards, but for the most part, they used budget draw card engines, budget board wives, budget everything. And so I decided, after coming across it recently, to revamp it, but with one stipulation being that I was not going to spend a cent on it. So I decided revamping it, the only way to revamp it was to use cards that I already owned in my collection. So the deck itself still only cost me $25, despite the fact that the deck itself is no longer a $25 deck. So that is the premise of what we're doing here. So we're going to go into who Zurgo Helmsmasher is and kind of explain the direction of the deck with that. All right. Zurgo Helmsmasher is a 5-mana Mardu color, so red, white, and black. It has haste. It has to attack each combat if able. It has indestructible as long as it's your turn. And whenever a creature dealt damage by Zurgo dies that particular turn, you put a +1/+1 counter on Zurgo Helmsmasher. And he is a 7/2. So basically, the concept of this deck was to kind of be like Voltron-y, except that the budget version didn't have anything remotely close to Voltron in it. So if you don't know what Voltron is, it's a reference to the old anime and the newer cartoon series made out here in the US. Voltron basically means you're going to stack it up with enchantments and equipment and try and kill your opponents with commander damage. So the concept of the budget deck was still to kill your opponents with commander damage, but through a different method. Because Zurgo Helmsmasher is indestructible on your turn, you can cast board wipes and Zurgo won't die. And so at that point, he should be the only one left on the board, so you can swing in and deal combat damage with him to your opponents. The problem with that is that having only 7 power means that he would have to take a full 3 turns to kill a single opponent. So when you're playing 4-player Commander, this can be a little bit difficult, or just outright difficult. So I had to do some fun little changes to it, because this deck came with no equipment. I still wanted to keep the deck within the kind of framework they had created for it. So the changes that I made were mostly just upgrades, but there's still some cards where I just completely removed it to put in something different. Most specifically, there was a lot of really inefficient mana rocks that I completely took out for equipment, because the deck can function with the 6 mana rocks that I have put in there. Without further ado, we'll take a look at the deck. So the first thing we're going to look at is the creatures, and because this deck is focused on the idea and concept of board wiping, there are actually not a whole lot of creatures in this deck, and it's probably for the best. We are going to focus most of our attention on trying to get Zurgo in play and to deal lethal damage with him. So, as our creatures, we have, starting with Bearer of the Heavens. It is 8 for a 10/10. When it dies, destroy all permanents at the beginning of the next end step. So it's a 10/10, and your opponents don't want to kill it. They want to bounce it or find some other way to get rid of it. Exiling it even would work. But you cannot kill it, because otherwise it literally destroys everything, and I do mean lands as well. Next up, we have Brash Taunter, 5 for a 1/1. He is indestructible, and whenever he is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent, and you can tap 2 in a red and it to have it fight another creature. So there's 2 reasons I put this in here. The first big reason is that it's indestructible, which, just like Zurgo Helmsmasher, the concept here is that when I play this board wipes, this guy is going to live through that. More importantly, if I play something that is a big damage board wipe, things like Blasphemous Act, which I don't actually run in here because I didn't have an extra copy, it's going to deal that much damage to target opponent. Also, it can block some of the bigger creatures that your opponents put out and punish them for attacking unless they have trample, basically. So Brash Taunter. Next, we have Deathbringer Regent. 7 for a 5/6 flying. When Deathbringer Regent enters the battlefield, if you cast it from your hand and there are 5 or more creatures on the battlefield, destroy all other creatures. So it keeps with the idea of having board wipes after board wipes after board wipes. We're just going to try and keep the field as clean as possible. Next, we have Magus of the Disc, 4 for a 2/4. Magus of the Disc enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap 1 and Magus of the Disc to destroy all creatures, artifacts, and enchantments. So Magus of the Disc is the creature form of Nevinrael's Disc. I think I chose not to put Nevinrael's Disc in here, probably because I had Magus of the Disc in here, but I'm not actually 100% sure. But basically, it is Nevinrael's Disc on legs. Next, we have Piru the Volatile. He is 8 for a 7/7 flying lifelink. At the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice Piru the Volatile unless you pay Mardu colors, red, white, black. When Piru dies, it deals 7 damage to each non-legendary creature. So you can keep it on the table as long as you'd like, because it has the 7/7 body with flying and lifelink, so you can bolster your life total. And when it stops being useful to you, you can literally sacrifice it at the beginning of your upkeep to board wipe. Next, we have Realm Cloaked Giant, 7 for a 7/7 Vigilance. Obviously, we have this in here for the cast off for 5, destroy all non-giant creatures. So this is a board wipe and a body. It's just a downright efficient card. Next, we have Selfless Glyph Weaver. 2 and a white. Exile Selfless Glyph Weaver. Creatures you control gain indestructible until end of turn. And then also, it has a flip side to it. Fun little modal double-sided cards. On the back side, we have Deadly Vanity. 8. Choose a creature or planeswalker, then destroy all other creatures and planeswalkers. So this actually serves 2 really great purposes for this deck. The Selfless Glyph Weaver himself can be used to save some of your non-indestructible creatures if that becomes necessary. But you can also just simply cast it for the Deadly Vanity side and, again, just destroy everything but, whatever creature you choose not to destroy. Which, because we don't run that many creatures, it could be anything that really, I guess, suits your fancy. One of the, for instance, Bearer of the Heavens. There was one other creature I wanted to put in here, and unfortunately I did not have it in my binder at the time. It was Ryu from Kamigawa Neon Dynasties. because it allows you to take a second combat step. It does not have Indestructible, and it was one of the reasons why I kept Selfless Glyphweaver in here. When I saw the backside of Selfless Glyphweaver, I was like, okay, you know what? It's still worth keeping. So, Selfless Glyphweaver. Next, we're going to take a look at the instants, and there aren't a lot of instants, but, well, I wouldn't say there aren't a lot of instants. I would say there's about an average amount of instants in here, which is very different from the number of sorceries. So, from the very beginning, we have Blood Pact. It is 3, target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. We have Crackling Doom, Mardu colors, red, white, black. Crackling Doom deals 2 damage to each opponent. Each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures he or she controls. So this is kind of a spot removal, but instead of just hitting a single opponent, it's going to hit all of your opponents, and it's going to force them to sacrifice their highest power creature. Sometimes that is not always their best creature, but in most cases, it is their best creature. Next, we have Crushing Disappointment. 4, each player loses 2 life, and then you draw 2 cards. Then we have Disenchant. 2, destroy target artifact or enchantment. I know this is an old card, but it is a tried and true card. 2 to destroy an artifact or enchantment, relatively straightforward. I'm sure there's a million cards that you could use in here that would be a little bit better, but you know, you can't really complain about that. Next, we have Fated Retribution. It is 7, destroy all creatures and planeswalkers. If it's your turn, scry 2. So this is, I think, one of 2 instant speed board wipes that are actually in this deck. And it incentivizes actually playing it on your turn so that you can get that scry 2. The best part about this is it also destroys planeswalkers, so if you're playing against Super Friends, you still have a chance. Next up, we have Fracture. Cost 2, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or planeswalker. So this is spot removal that isn't necessarily specific to a creature, because we all know that not always creatures are the worst things on the table. Sometimes we have artifacts, enchantments, and planeswalkers that need dealing with. Next, we have Magma Quake, the second of the 2 instant speed board wipes. This is X and 2 red. Magma Quake deals X damage to each creature without flying and each planeswalker. So I had an opportunity to decide whether I wanted to run this or Starstorm, and I decided at the end of the day to run this because, again, planeswalkers are a heck of a lot harder to deal with than your creatures are. And while Starstorm definitely still hits flying creatures, Magma Quake has that opportunity to hit planeswalkers, and sometimes that is the key to winning a game. Next up, we have Mortify. 3, destroy target creature or enchantment. So we're going to keep up with this whole suite of cards that has some versatility to it. Next up, we have Return to Dust. 4, remove target artifact or enchantment from the game. If you played this spell during your main phase, you may remove up to 1 other target artifact or enchantment from the game. So this is super good. Despite the fact that it is instant speed, you can actually cast it on your turn to hit 2 targets. If you do cast it on your turn. But I think the really important part here is that it exiles. And so we can hit those indestructible targets, especially things like Blightsteel Colossus, Darksteel Colossus, those indestructible targets that are generally extremely difficult to get rid of. This will hit. Next up, we have Thrill of Possibility. 2, as an additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards. Next, we're going to take a look at the sorceries. And when I say there are a lot of sorceries, I mean there is a huge amount of sorceries in here. There are more sorceries in this deck than there are anything else in the deck. Okay, starting with, and you can see this right here, this is the number of sorceries in here, and as you can imagine, a good chunk of these are board wipes. And like I said, this was not my original idea. I read an article that said, lose your friends for $20, and it was mostly board wipes. I think I cut out 2 total board wipes, but I did mostly keep a lot of the board wipes in here because I wanted to keep the same flavor of the deck. Starting with Ancient Craving, it is 4, you draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. Next up, we have Chain Reaction. 4, Chain Reaction deals X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. Cleansing Nova. 5, choose 1, destroy all creatures or destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Next, we have Dam. Costs 2, destroy target creature. A creature destroyed this way can't be regenerated. You can overload it for 2 and 2 white. If you cast this for the overload cost, it will destroy all creatures and they can't be regenerated. We have Day of Judgment. 4, destroy all creatures. We have Deadly Tempest. 6, destroy all creatures. Each player loses life equal to the number of creatures they controlled that were destroyed this way. We have Devastating Mastery. It is 6, but you can cast it for 4 rather than pay its mana cost. If you cast it for 4, an opponent chooses up to 2 non-land permanents they control and returns them to their hand, and then it destroys all non-land permanents. Next we have Fumigate. 5, destroy all creatures, and then gain life for each creature destroyed this way. Next we have Hour of Revelation. It is 6, but it costs 3 less if there are 10 or more non-land permanents on the battlefield, and you destroy all non-land permanents. Next we have Kaya's Wrath. 4, to destroy all creatures, and then gain life equal to the number of creatures you controlled that were destroyed this way. Next we have Martial Coup. X and 2 white, create X 1/1 white soldier creature tokens. If X was 5 or more, destroy all other creatures. Next we have Mythos of Snapdax. 2 and 2 white. Each player chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents they control, then sacrifices the rest. If you spent a black and a red to cast the spell, you can choose the permanents for each player instead. This is super good because we are playing the Mardu colors. So as long as you dump the black and red into that colorless cost right there, you get to choose which creatures they get to keep. Which non-land permanents they get to keep, which is super, super important when it comes to destroying basically everything. Because you can leave them with the absolute worst of the worst. Next we have Necromantic Selection. Costs 7, destroy all creatures, then return a creature card put into the graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. It's a black zombie in addition to its other colors and types. Exile Necromantic Selection. So this is a great way to end the board and still manage to create a board for yourself, on top of the fact that you may still have Zurgo Helmsmasher in play. Next we have Open the Armory. 2, search your library for an aura or equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So this is our way of searching out some of our equipments if we're not getting them when we need them. Then we have Painful Truths. 3, converge, you draw X cards, and you lose X life, where X is the number of colors of mana spent to cast Painful Truths. In this Mardu deck, it can go up to 3 if you spend red, white, and black on it. Next we have Phyrexian Rebirth. 6, destroy all creatures, then create an XX colorless horror artifact creature token, where X is the number of creatures destroyed this way. So again, much like the Necromantic Selection, this is a great way to destroy the board and get a board for yourself alongside with Zurgo Helmsmasher. Next we have Planar Cleansing. This is 6 to destroy all non-land permanents. Next we have Planar Outburst. 5, destroy all non-land creatures. And then if you cast it for its awakening, which is 5 and 3 white, you get to put 4+1/+1 counters on target land. It becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste, and it is still land. So again, we're going to wipe the board and then create some small advantage for ourselves. Next up, we have Relentless Assault. This is 4 untap all creatures that attack this turn. After this main phase, there is an additional combat phase, followed by an additional main phase. This is so that we can swing in with Zurgo Helmsmasher and try and close out the game as quickly as possible. Next, we have Route 5. You may cast Route as though it had Flash if you pay 2 more to cast it. So for 7, you can cast it at instant speed. Destroy all creatures. They can't be regenerated. Next, we have Ruinous Ultimatum. Probably one of the scariest board wipes in this deck. It costs 7. Destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control. So this only affects your opponent's boards, and it hits all non-land permanents. That's going to be mana rocks, that's going to be enchantments, that's going to be everything they have except for lands. It's just super good. Next up, we got Secret Rendezvous 3. You and target opponent each draw 3 cards. I'm not really worried about giving my opponent's card draw at this point because we're just going to wipe the board of whatever they end up putting down. Granted, it can give them answers. We're not really trying to worry too much about that. We just want to swing in with Zurgo Helmsmasher and end the game. Next, we have Shadowed Sky. 4. Each player who controls a creature with power 4 or greater draws a card and then destroy all creatures. Next, we have Single Combat. It is 5. Each player chooses a creature or planeswalker they control, then sacrifices the rest. Players can't cast creature or planeswalker spells until the end of your next turn. So this is super, super powerful for a deck like this because we're going to get rid of a massive amount of creatures. Yes, they're going to hold on to 1 or a planeswalker, and they're not going to be able to play any more planeswalkers or creatures until the end of your next turn, which means that the board stays relatively open for Zurgo to swing in and just be obnoxious. And again, it hits planeswalkers, so we're being aware that Super Friends decks exist. Next up, we have Thrilling Discovery 2. You gain 2 life, then you may discard 2 cards. If you do, draw 3 cards. Next, we have Tormenting Voice. 2, as an additional cost to cast the spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards. Next, we have Vindicate. 3, destroy target permanent. Next, we have Volcanic Vision. 7, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Volcanic Vision deals damage equal to that card's converted mana cost to each creature your opponents control, and then you exile Volcanic Vision. This is such a great card in this deck because we can fetch back one of our bigger board wipes and then board wipe in response because it does that with Volcanic Vision, and then later we can use the board wipe we fetched back to keep the board clear. It's just a really fantastic recursion. Next, we have Winds of Wrath. 5, destroy all creatures that aren't enchanted. They can't be regenerated. And then finally in the sorceries, we have Wrath of God, destroy all creatures. Bury means that they can't be regenerated. So it would now say destroy all creatures, they can't be regenerated. Boom. Next up, we are going to take a look at the artifacts. I believe there's 12 artifacts. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly how many. Starting with Argentum Armor, it is 6. Equipped creature gets +6/+6. When equipped creature attacks, destroy target permanent, and it equips for 6. This is really good because we can destroy any permanents that were left over from board wipes that didn't necessarily hit all of their targets. It does say target permanent and not target non-land permanent, so if you needed to, you could destroy lands, although that can get really salty. It gives +6/+6, so on Zurgo, that makes him a 13/8, and that is phenomenal when it comes to commander damage. Next up, we have Boros Locket. Gonna be honest with you, Boros Locket isn't here because I ran out of Boros Signets. And again, like I said, I didn't want to spend any extra money on this. So we have a Boros Locket in here. 3 to tap for red and white. You can also tap for hybrid red-white to sacrifice it to draw 2 cards. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's also not the best thing in the world. Next up, we have Darksteel Ingot. Now, this actually was several different cards before I finally settled on Darksteel Ingot. The reason I settled on Darksteel Ingot is because these board wipes aren't always just going to hit your opponents. Sometimes they hit you as well, and you're going to lose some things. The Darksteel Ingot is indestructible, so it's one of the few things that will survive. Next, we have Embercleave. It costs 6. It has Flash. It costs 1 less for each attacking creature you control. And when Embercleave enters the battlefield, you attach it to target creature you control. The equipped creature gets +1/+1, has Double Strike, and Trample. So this is super good. It brings Zurgo up to an 8/3. Gives him Double Strike, so he's going to swing in for 16, and it gives him Trample. So one of the biggest things that was a problem with Zurgo is that he does not have Trample. So if you swing in and your opponent has anything left to block, they can block it with the smallest little thing, and it will prevent any damage to them. So this is why I threw in the equipment that I threw in, because I wanted to make sure that Zurgo had some Trample there. The Double Strike here just makes it even sweeter. And it has an equip cost of 3 if you want to re-equip it. Next up, we have Loxodon Warhammer. 3. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 and has Trample and Lifelink equipped for 3. So this brings Zurgo up to a 10/2 with Trample and Lifelink. The Trample is important. The Lifelink is even more important, because if your opponents start thinking, holy cow, this guy's getting out of hand, we need to deal with him, this helps you bolster your life total so you don't die as quickly. Next up, we have Orzhov Signet. Yes, I had all the other signets. I just didn't have a Boros Signet. It is very sad, and I know that. You could tap 1 and Orzhov Signet to create a white and a black mana. Cost 2. Then we have Rakdos Signet 2. You tap 1 and Rakdos Signet to create a black-red. Then we have Shadow Spear. Costs 1. Equipped creature gets +1/+1, has Trample and Lifelink. Permanents your opponent's control. Lose Hexproof and Indestructible until end of turn if you pay 1. And it equips for 2. This one is super, super, super important for this deck, because as I mentioned, indestructible cards are extremely difficult to get rid of. So this will remove the indestructible ability. Then you can follow it up with a board wipe to kill it, and then Zurgo can swing in pretty much uncontested. The big thing here, though, is it gets +1/+1, Trample, and Lifelink, so it brings it up to a 9/3 Trample Lifelink. The Trample is important, but like I said, the Lifelink is even more important. Next up, we have Sol Ring. This was the only Sol Ring I had left. I'm so sorry that for anybody who's cringing, because this is an old Sol Ring, but yeah, it was already in really bad condition anyway. I did secretly spend a little bit of money to buy another Sol Ring so I could replace it, because I like keeping this guy out of decks. But anyway, Sol Ring, 1 to tap for 2. Next up, we have Sword of Vengeance. 3. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has First Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Haste. Equips for 3. So again, it gives the Trample. In this case, it also gives Vigilance, so it doesn't tap to attack. And then on top of that, it has First Strike, so it's going to deal damage before your opponent has a chance to deal damage, or before your opponent's creature has a chance to deal damage. So if it kills it, then it just straight up doesn't take damage, which doesn't really matter for Zurgo, because, you know, he's got Indestructible, but he's only Indestructible on your turn. So with the Vigilance, he'll actually be able to block as well as attack. So having that First Strike is really important. And it brings him up to a 9/2. And also, sorry, on that Shadow Spear, I was wrong. He's an 8/3, not a 9/3. My maths were bad. Next up, we have Talisman of Hierarchy. 2 to tap for colorless, or you can tap it for white or black. But if you do so, you take 1 damage. And then finally, in the artifacts, we have Vorpal Sword. 1, equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has Death Touch. Equips for 2 black. You can tap 5 and 3 black. Until end of turn, Vorpal Sword gains whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player. That player loses the game. So this is to speed up the game. Zurgo Helmsmasher, or this deck just in general, is very vulnerable. If your opponents catch on very quickly to what you're doing, it can become a really dire situation for you. So anything you can do to give yourself an edge to try and get that win, you should do. And this is one of those ways. Yes, it costs 8, but I don't think any amount of mana to make your opponent just automatically lose the game is not worth it. So this is +2/+0, so it becomes a 9/2, but really it's just in here so that we can make your opponent just instantly lose the game, especially if you have 3 opponents. Next, we're going to take a look at enchantments, and as you can imagine, there aren't a lot of them. There are 3 total enchantments, and they're all relatively necessary. Starting with Blind Obedience. 2 has Extort, which is great, just in case you want to bolster your life total. But the really important part here is that artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Because we want to make sure that they do not get to use what they put back into play before we get a chance to board wipe it. Yes, this seems mean, but again, I go back to the whole fact that once your opponents catch on to what you're doing, it's pretty much downhill for Zurgo, so you have to take as many advantages as you can get. And yes, I had one just sitting in my collection, so why not? Next up, we have Forging the Tyrite Sword. This is a saga. For chapters 1 and 2, you create a treasure token. For chapter 3, you get to search your library for a card named Halvar, God of Battle, or an equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. Obviously, this is in here to fetch equipment. We need to get those situational equipments ASAP. Maybe we need that Shadow Spear so we can get rid of Indestructible, or maybe we want to throw the Sword of Vengeance on Zurgo so that he can block. Who knows? Next up, we have Kaya's Ghost Form, for obvious reasons. This is 1, enchant Aura. Enchanted creature or planeswalker you control, when the enchanted permanent dies or is put into exile, return that card to the battlefield under your control. Yeah, we do this to protect Zurgo, because again, your opponents are going to want to just shut him down as soon as possible. The longer you can keep him in play without having to pay his taxes, the better. How did that happen? Anyway, next we're going to take a look at non-basic lands. The original non-basic lands in here. Actually, let me just double check. Okay, yeah. There are only 3 of the original non-basic lands in here still, because the non-basic lands that they chose in here were super inefficient. And it made the deck so slow. So I have updated the land base, and it is probably the one part of the deck that is most expensive at this point, just because I happen to have the cards laying around and they really needed to be in here. You just have to understand me. They had thriving lands in here that were just, I'm telling you, those are not good. Stop playing thrivings. But anyway, going back to what I was doing, we have Blood Crypt in here. It is the shock land for black-red. Buried Ruin, you can tap it for colorless, or you can tap 2 and it to sacrifice it and return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. This is to get our equipment back if your opponents destroy it. We have Command Tower. You can tap it for commander color identity. We have Dragon Skull Summit. This is the check land for red-black. We have Evolving Wilds, so we can fetch for basic lands. We have Exotic Orchard. You can tap it to add a mana to your mana pool of any color that your opponents can produce. It's a 3-color deck, so chances are your opponents are producing at least 1 color that you're playing. We have Fabled Passage to fetch for basic lands. We have Godless Shrine, white-black shockland. We have Savai Triome. It is the Mardu Triome. We have Temple of Malice. It is the red-black Scryland. We have Temple of Silence, the black-white Scryland. We have Temple of Triumph, the red-white Scryland. We have Vault of Champions, the white-black Crowdland. That is our non-basics. So you're going to notice right off the bat that I do not have the original Mardu tap land. I did not have one in my collection, ironically. Maybe someday I will spend the money to get one. Who knows? And you'll also notice that I did not have the Sacred Foundry because I didn't have any extra copies. All 4 of the copies I have are being used currently in other commander decks, and like I said, I don't want to take them apart. Lastly, we're going to take a look at the basic lands in here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mountains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 plains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 swamps. And that is my Zurgo Helmsmasher upgraded deck that I spent no more than $25 on, and I can attest to that truth. Because otherwise I would have had the Mardu Tapland and World Slayer and a couple other cards that I definitely wanted to put in here, but I just didn't have in my collection at the moment. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And that's it, guys. Until next time, hope you enjoyed. Peace.